Exciting day. I'm out at Ken's farm for the first time, which is really awesome. It's just amazingly beautiful. You can see he's put together a nice gate here, and he's out watering, and it's the beginning of something much bigger, which is nice to see. But super exciting to see at the start of it all. But it's like third week of July. Should be about 29 degrees today, and it's a beautiful day. Man, take a look at some of this though. Look at that movement. It's unbelievable. Oh, here's that lovely white pine. What time do you find you water there, Ken? What's your, do you have a schedule, or is it just when the trees get dry?
Yeah, I check them when I'm home from work, which is usually around like 4:30 or so.
Yep.
And that's typically when they all get watered. Ideally, I'd be doing it at like 9 o'clock every morning, but it's just kind of not feasible.
Yep.
Hottest days, I get my wife to come out and water the vulnerable trees or anything that really looks like it needs it. Hasn't been that hot though, so we'll see.
We're just starting. Now it's going to get hot here.
Yeah.
We got a week of insane heat coming, so
Yeah. Shade cloth is going up over like this whole lower half. Most of my trees are sensitive to that like over 35 degrees Celsius weather. I got a lot of larches and hemlocks and quite a bit of deciduous stuff. So
you think we're going to get over 35 here?
Soon,
Yeah,
I think.
it's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah. Every year there's at least a couple weeks worth of it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I got a bunch of my trees up on benches too, and out and exposed mid-heat, right? Like that 12 to 3 heat, and I'm just like, uh-oh, I'm gonna have to move them all to the ground and protect them at some point, right?
The ground helps a lot.
Yeah,
any tree that's weak goes on the ground just kind of without fail.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about the temperature of the roots, right? Like in these black pots, I got a bunch of these in here, and man, does they ever heat up.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's that thing where it's like, man, those roots are getting really hot, and you're just getting the fluctuation in the roots. Whereas if you have them on the ground, the temperature's not fluctuating as much, right?
Yeah, totally. Humidity's a little higher too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Whether it's on mulch or decomposing grass like I've got here, it's yeah, it's quite a bit of humidity down there.
You're going. I had it going. I'm just stopped it. So here's so that trip we went up to the subalpine. This is that triple spruce that you saw lying down. Oh, look at that, eh?
Yeah, no real consideration for design with the planting angle.
Yeah,
it was just the container I had that it happened to fit quite nicely in.
It's a great container too. I love that.
Just a little bit of sphagnum kind of built up on this front edge there to hold the soil a little better.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
looks like it's doing good. It's shooting up some.
Yeah, just starting to push
out some stuff, right? Which is nice. Look at that. What angle do you think you're gonna? I mean, you've only had so much time with the tree. But
yeah, it was on the ground for so long. I haven't really looked at it too much.
Yeah,
like it'd suit a few things. You could keep the 3 trunks, and maybe further push that angle, then bring them quite upright. You know, feel like a tree that kind of slumped over and then kind of lobbered up.
Yeah. Yep.
Or you could tilt it, pardon me, the other way.
Oh yeah, it's all good.
And then you get the angle change, you know. You could even just gin that and then compress that way down and just build a nice stout little tree out of it. So
yeah,
there's options, which is good considering, you know, it's only been here for a couple weeks now.
Yeah. That's great. So I just wanted to show this, that a quick video. This is a lilac. unbelievably big. So,
Let
you
me
know,
get
you
in
saw
here
my
for
little
scale.
videos, but yeah,
It's a hand on the front side.
look at
There's a
that.
hand on the back side.
Like, that thing is amazing.
There's even a little bit more taper just below the
Okay.
chips there.
Yeah. And this is all the growth here coming off the side, which is nice. So it's
Yeah.
still alive, but man, is that amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it had heaved over from winter snow weight. It was like a full-size lilac tree, if you can call it that, multiple shoots. Heaved over, we were there to remove it, chip it, and we just kind of, I think we winched the root ball out because it looked like it would come.
Yeah.
And it came out with maybe, I don't know, like a couple pop cans worth of feeder roots.
Right, wow.
Kind of isolate it in 2 spots.
Yeah.
And I went, no, don't chip it, don't throw it in the truck. And I wrapped it in a wet towel,
Yeah.
took it home at the end of the day.
Well, this
And I threw it in a container I had left over from another big tree. Threw any old soil in there because I was very skeptical of it doing anything.
Well, I imagine.
And it grew.
It's amazing.
And it was too heavy for me to lift.
Look at
So 1 year after it was potted, I had to effectively bare root it to get it here.
Right.
I couldn't lift it. Like even just this is 100 and some odd pounds.
Wow.
And it's growing in more or less full sun after that, and was bare rooted in June. Like, yeah, they're hardy trees, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I noticed that too, right?
Yeah.
It's just in the roots, like everything is just an extreme cultivar, right?
Mm-hmm.
They, you know, that's probably why they're everywhere, because everyone's got them in their yards because they're just so hardy and strong. And oh, look at that beautiful movement in that, eh?
Yeah, that was
This is that repot that you did.
pretty significant one, yeah.
So we looked at this plant last fall when you had it set up there in the last series of videos that we did. Okay, wow.
So somewhere up like that, I think.
Yeah. Oh, just the movement in here is just so, it's just something else.
Yeah, it's almost hard to identify what the trunk was doing. Like it's
Like what happened to it. And
yeah, like there's a little bit of Nabari somewhere down there still. Like it's still plunging down. But yeah, it kind of doubled back on itself. You get a closed loop there, and then a hard drop. So I opted to do a cascade with it, just based on that angle change. Like it's so sharp and plunging so much downward. It just seemed a shame not to really use it.
It makes sense in a natural sort of perspective too. Like how would you? I mean, I guess the snow could just flatten it sideways and then try to grow back up, but it would almost make more sense. But I guess that is maybe what happened.
Yeah.
But it is, like you said, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe this was the original apex. This was a branchy thing, and then it was, you know, when it was up like this. Or
and I suspect it came out of like a swampy area
right.
too. So like it might have even just been
swamps,
just completely sideways.
just swamp growing out sideways and in the swamps, and that's so hard for me because we don't have many swamp, bog environments here, so you don't see them in nature and go, okay, that's what actually happened to the tree.
I think too, when you're collecting out of them, you don't really know what you're getting.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You're basically just saying, okay, there's developed bark, there's some tight twigging, and there's probably a sweet base buried somewhere in there. Like we can look at this one
What
here.
what do we think this is as far as
Oh,
trees?
that's a shore pine.
Shore pine. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this too, shore pine. I mean, when I bought it from the collector, it had soil, like not even soil, like the really spongy bog mass. Like that stuff is really strange to work with.
Okay.
Like all the way up to here. Like this was just kind of peaking.
And so he had just put it in the container and go, oh, it's the collection process.
Yeah, well, because it's got roots all the way up there, but they're sporadic and really quite delicate.
See old roots there coming out, right? And just to let it survive too, right? And
yeah.
Okay, and then, so you pulled that right out.
Yeah, really built it down. Like you can tell in the container it's in. There were pretty much no roots here.
Yeah.
And they were all, I think it was tilted even further down.
Okay.
And ideally it's going to be, I think, brought back up the other way.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of really sharp bends and whatnot in here. I really like the one on this branch. Probably hard to see through all the bark and stuff, but I think I want to turn this into the kind of defining and like character branch of the tree.
Okay. And I love these short little movements all the way up, right? And there's like harder bends, and then there's rounder bends, and It's just that bog environment, I guess, right? It's creating that. All this nice deadwood that's wrapped in there. I love that. You
And
know,
it's
it's
old
just-
too.
Yeah.
Like seeing the kind of wood respond to the deadwood and starting to kind of roll over, and yeah.
I mean, look at that bark, especially for such a small branch. To see that kind of bark on it, it's just amazing. And so when you know, we've talked a lot about defining branches, like the defining branch. You know, one way to think of that obviously would be the lower branch, the lowest branch, or the directional branch. I've heard it talked about that. But how do you think about the defining branch? Because you talked about that curve.
Yeah, well, it's often the biggest branch on the tree in terms of width and diameter, that kind of thing. But for me, it's the branch that breaks the kind of the design and the space of the green mass the most, right?
Okay.
So right now there's really no defining branch. It's almost just straight lines
Yeah.
all the way down.
Yeah, and
this
you
is
can't-
this is an unstyled tree.
Yeah, and you can't really make out a branch. It just looks like a.
Yeah, it's just a big mop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's the branch that breaches the design of the tree the furthest.
Okay.
It has the furthest. What does Ryan say? The furthest asymmetry. It's
Right.
the thing that defines that. So choosing this branch to be the defining branch is locking myself into a design where, you know, the primary branch goes that way and has this kind of character. So everything else should kind of want to reflect that in some way. You can have bits that, of course, pull away from that, but to really make this defining branch prominent and that curve prominent and that length prominent tells me that, okay, the tree's moving this way in terms of trunk wood,
Right.
but with the foliage moving that way and likely the apex moving that way, it maybe kind of tells a story of it being an upright tree and it tipping over for some reason, but it's still growing back that way for other reasons.
Yeah.
Like people would, you know, think like a tree growing on a cliff, it grows away from the cliff where there's light, but a tree can grow on a bank that's eroding. And it might, you know, there still might be good light up that bank. And
Yeah.
it's almost fighting against gravity at that point.
So the trunk's going one way, but the right, okay,
Yeah.
coming back the other way.
And it helps too that, well, no, help is the word, but the base is relatively weak. Like there's a little bit more kind of nabari there. Hard to see through the pumice and whatnot, but it doesn't have this tremendously fat, strong, gripping base to anchor direction this way.
Right.
So if I got the trunk going this way, and let's say use that as the defining branch, which should sure be tempting because it's quite long and it is also interesting.
Yeah.
I could swing that there, make that the defining branch. Well, then I've got two components of the tree anchoring them, or pardon me, moving this direction.
What's holding the weight?
What's really holding it?
Holding the
And,
weight. Yeah.
and maybe that's something you want to go for. You want a tree that does look like it's teetering on its own demise.
Yeah.
Maybe there's
Yeah.
design space in there.
It'd be different, right? If you had, you're saying if you had big roots coming off here holding, then you could say, okay,
Yeah.
maybe I can visually.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, I guess it's about balancing that stability with, like you said, the sort of sense that it's going to tip over or it's
Yeah.
too unnatural that it.
And you can use the apex to kind of counter that. You could have a trunk moving one way, the defining branch moving that same way, and then it almost suits it here. You could have this trunk then moving back there and kind of intersecting the trunk line and whatnot, but I don't know if that would really suit the tree. So
Yeah, and I guess, you know, when I think about that defining branch, it's sort of carrying your mind's eye, or it's going to capture that right away. So you move up the base of the trunk, or you start the nabari, move up, and then you see that branch, like you see the whole tree, and you kind of get zoomed in and brought in, then you move up and then you see this branch, and that kind of gives you an imprint of what the tree's doing, or something, and then everything can kind of follow that, because you always hear them talking about, okay, we'll start with the lowest defining branch.
doesn't have to be the lowest. That's
yeah,
it's
right,
the thing. Like
right.
there the hemlock we looked at. The defining branch is coming off the crown. It's a little bit of a drop branch coming
Yeah.
from there. That's really
Right, it doesn't have to be the right.
doesn't always have to be the lowest. It
Right.
often is, but I mean, if you look at trees in the wild, especially if they're all forest grown,
Yeah.
usually the lower branches get overtaken by something in the midpoint or even the crown, right?
Yeah, right.
So there's really no golden rule to it. Like
Yeah.
you can play around with it. The only thing I'd caution is if you have your defining branch being somewhere higher. maybe this isn't the best illustration, but let's say that I had a defining branch off somewhere up here, but I still kept this branch and moved it down. You just don't want to, in terms of biology, be putting something above it that's going to shade it out.
Right.
But that can be a visual trick. I could have this upper portion being a defining branch way out here, and creating tons of shade for anything directly below it.
Right.
Well, I don't put this branch below it. I put this branch a little forward. It'll look shorter.
Yeah.
But it's not being it's not competing for light with the branch above it.
Yeah, and I guess when you're thinking about a defining branch, there's sort of a size of the branch and the length of the branch. Because if you have two of them, they would almost visually compete.
Yeah.
Right, and so you get this one. It's almost like a person with one arm. You see that in the trees. That they'll mimic it. The practitioners will mimic it with their shoulder and their arm. But when you think about it, we don't visually seem to like those bar branches where it would be like a human with two arms. It's like a human with one arm reaching out or something.
The bar branching too, over time, you're just creating a big kind of swelling point in the tree, and then you're stuck staring at that. It's really hard for us not to be drawn to that inverse taper kind of point.
Yeah.
The bar branching isn't no bar branching for aesthetic reasons only. It's also biology is working against you.
Yeah.
That's the thing, like a candelabra tree where all the growth kind of originates from maybe one whorl, and of course you're going to get swelling there. And deciduous stuff too, you'll get like a nice base, and then it spreads out like that because it's got multiple things. That's all well and good. You can still use that, but for more of a upright tree with little bends and stuff, to have sudden balls of thicker trunk wood can be kind of difficult to look at.
Yeah, well, like you said, it draws your eye there, it captures your eye. It's hard to move away from that, and so you just keep getting brought to this. And of course, you lose the taper and stuff. So.
Honestly, a complicated tree to repot, and it will be a complicated tree to style. Just moving branches without knocking off all that bark is going to be difficult.
Well, and they're pretty old, even though it's pretty flexible species. It's pretty old. Look at that, I love that.
I think guy wires are going to be really helpful because we have all these really good points to anchor off on the deadwood. Yeah. So that'll be good to get the big bends of guy wires, and then I can do the fine branching with just regular wires where the bark isn't as developed, and I'm not quite so worried about it.
Okay. Well, that's great. And I appreciate the discussion on the sort of defining branch and how to sort of conceptualize that, right? And
I should mention one more thing. If anybody's working on trees collected out of bogs, be really careful with the roots. Like if they're in a nursery container or even a wooden box, if you can cut the box away as opposed to trying to pull the tree out, do that. Because the soil that it's growing in is so heavy. Even when you try to let it dry out, it's still so dense, and the roots are often so long and stringy through it. If you just kind of pull it out, you risk that weight ripping roots. Like I had one root on the back side, like the one root on this back side, start to separate from like the primary kind of nabari just from the weight of the soil attached to it. So I use raffia because it's going to break down to kind of tie it and pin it back down. It was a really scary repot because, okay, I lose that root, the tree's going to live. It's still got tons, but maybe that one root is keeping one kind of live section on the trunk here going. And with that gone, the deadwood might expand and
well, if that boggy, you could imagine there'd be just a lot of fine roots. Right, like there'd be these teeny little roots, right, like growing in sand or something.
Yeah,
right?
Mixed with dead ones, and it's just just tread with caution on trees that came out of swampy environments.